Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at the events of a day, the historic context in which those events took place, and the historic ramifications of those events. As always, if you have not yet, please hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content, and tell a friend. And without any further ado, this day in history, April 19th. And on this day, in 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing occurred. It occurred at 9:02 a.m. and when Timothy McVeigh had parked a Ryder truck with a fertilizer bomb in the back. The truck bomb detonated, killing 168 people inside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. It injured over 500 more. The blast damaged 324 buildings in a 16-block radius of the blast site. McVeigh himself was arrested within 90 minutes of the bombing for driving without a license plate and illegal possession of a weapon. He was quickly identified by federal investigators as the bombers. McVeigh said that his motive was the federal response to Ruby Ridge and the siege of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, which had ended 2 years before to the day before the bombing in Oklahoma City. McVeigh was executed by the federal government in 2001. Nichols is currently serving a life sentence. An accomplice served 12 years in prison, and another accomplice received immunity for cooperation with the federal government in their investigation. The Murrah Building housed offices of the ATF, DEA, Social Security Administration, a recruiting office for the Army, and a Secret Service field office. McVeigh, in scoping out prospective targets for the bombing, said the building must house at least 2 law enforcement agencies of the federal government. He said any other would be a bonus, in his opinion. This bombing was very significant in the 1990s. As I said, it's the largest single act of domestic terrorism in American history, and it was the largest act of terrorism in American history until the September 11th attack. But this attack really brought to the forefront to most Americans of the activities of the anti-government militias that were out there and gaining prominence in the 1990s. It also exposed Americans to a white nationalist and hate network that was growing like a wildfire across America, and let average Americans know that hate groups were on the rise. As I said, McVeigh said that his inspiration, those are his words, I'm just using his words, was the federal government's response to Ruby Ridge and the siege of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. McVeigh, was a Gulf War veteran. He had fought in the Gulf War, and obviously afterwards he went down a very bad course. One of the responses to this event was President George H.W. Bush, who was the former president at the time. He resigned his life membership in the National Rifle Association because the National Rifle Association president had made some comments about federal agents that were very derogatory. And a gentleman that Bush knew very well, that was a Secret Service agent, was killed in the attacks. And it offended Bush that um, the president of the NRA would make such statements, and he said that I will not be a part of a group that ascribes to these beliefs and makes such statements. You also have the response of Bill Clinton, who was the president at the time. He addressed the nation. He went to the memorial service afterwards and really took a lead in spotlighting these organizations. There is a memorial on the site of the Murrah building now to the deceased, and they rebuilt a federal building in another part of Oklahoma City. Yes, just a tragic day in the life of Oklahoma City and the country, and a shocking act of domestic terrorism. I was in kindergarten at the time. I was 5 years old, but I very vividly remember coming home and watching the news coverage and watching the CBS Evening News that night with Dan Rather. And I never thought I would see that kind of carnage again in the United States. Little did I know, 6 years later, I would watch something even more violent and horrific than that. And then, 4 years later, I would watch Americans standing on the roofs of their houses, waiting to be rescued as their city flooded. And now we have the coronavirus that is certainly the scariest thing in my lifetime. You know, millennials get a lot of crap thrown at them. But if you think about the events that have occurred in our lifetime, in 1993, 2 years prior to this, there was a bombing at the World Trade Center. Oklahoma City. Centennial Park Olympic bombing that was carried out by an anti-government extremist, Eric Rudolph. The September 11th attacks. Hurricane Katrina. The Great Recession. The current coronavirus pandemic. I think that before you speak ill of millennials and our sensitive nature that people often like to poke fun at, maybe you should remember what we have gone through in our lifetime and what we have seen. It's just a terrible, terrible event in American history that occurred on this day. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.